The first time I met Seraya, she almost died because someone dropped a cargo container full of mining drills onto a royal shuttle. Nobody talks about that night anymore. Velis 9 was a frozen mining moon at the edge of Austravian space, the kind of place people only visited if they were desperate, hiding, or stupid enough to sign a corporate contract without reading the fine print. I was 24, hauling industrial fuel cells between docking stations for barely enough credits to keep my rust bucket ship in orbit. The storm hit during third shift. Ice particles slammed against the docking shields hard enough to shake the entire station. Sirens screamed overhead, while loaders scrambled across the platform, trying to lock down unsecured cargo before the wind ripped everything into vacuum. That was when the magnetic cranes failed. I remember hearing the snap before I saw it. A steel container the size of a house tore loose above Dock 14 and swung straight toward a polished silver shuttle surrounded by palace guards in white armor. Most people ran. I didn't. Honestly, I didn't even know why at the time. Maybe because everyone else froze. Maybe because humans are stupid in very specific ways. Or maybe because I saw her standing there through the storm glass. She wasn't queen yet. Just the emperor's daughter. Young. Angry-looking. Wrapped in a dark coat with silver markings on the sleeves. While everyone panicked around her, she stood completely still, staring up at the falling container like she couldn't believe something so ordinary was about to kill her. I grabbed the emergency tether from my cargo rig and ran straight into the storm. Somebody shouted at me to stop. I ignored them. The wind nearly threw me off the platform. Ice cut across my face so hard it felt like broken glass. I clipped the tether onto the shuttle landing strut, jumped onto the service rail, and slammed the emergency release lever before the crane collapsed. The container crashed into the rail system instead of the shuttle. The explosion knocked me unconscious. When I woke up 2 hours later, station security was dragging me out of a medical bay because my docking permit had expired. No medals, no reward, no royal thanks. Just a broken wrist and a repair bill I couldn't afford. I figured the palace people forgot me before their shuttle even left orbit. Turns out I was wrong. Because 6 years later, I was standing aboard the royal capital ship Astral Crown, wearing maintenance guard armor that didn't fit properly while the entire empire collapsed around me. The attack started during ceremony hour. No alarms. No warning. 1 second the fleet surrounded us in perfect formation above Astravia Prime. The next second half the ships turned their engines and disappeared into jump space. Panic spread through the command decks immediately. Nobles started screaming over each other. Officers abandoned stations. Emergency sirens finally activated 3 minutes too late, while defense platforms went dark one by one across the capital orbit. I stood outside Corridor 9 with a shock baton in one hand and absolutely no idea what was happening. Then I saw the royal escort rushing toward the command bridge. And in the middle of them, her, Queen Seraya Austravian. Older now. Taller. Cold-looking in the way only royalty can be. Silver armor beneath a white, ceremonial cloak. Dark hair braided behind her shoulders. Violet eyes focused straight ahead, while everyone around her looked terrified. Then she stopped walking. Right in the middle of the corridor. Her eyes locked onto mine. Not my face. Not my uniform. The small silver compass hanging from my belt. No, that wasn't possible. Because I lost that compass 6 years ago on Velis 9. My stomach dropped. Slowly, Seraya reached beneath the collar of her cloak and pulled out a chain hanging around her neck. And there it was. The same scratched silver compass. The same crack across the glass. The same tiny burn mark near the hinge from the docking explosion. For 1 second the noise of the collapsing fleet disappeared completely. She looked at me like she already knew exactly who I was. Then the ship shook violently beneath our feet. The lights died, and somewhere deep inside the Astral Crown, something exploded. The first person I saw die aboard the Astral Crown was Admiral Corrin. One moment, he was shouting orders across the command corridor. The next, half his chest disappeared through the wall behind him. Nobody even understood where the shot came from. The corridor exploded into panic. Royal officers scattered in every direction while emergency lights flashed red across the ceiling. Somewhere deeper in the ship, another explosion rolled through the metal structure hard enough to throw people off their feet. I grabbed the nearest railing before I hit the floor. The Queen didn't move. That was the first thing I noticed. Everyone else panicked. Seraya stood perfectly still in the middle of the chaos while armed escorts surrounded her with drawn plasma rifles. Then the ship lights died completely. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Somebody screamed. A second later, gunfire erupted. Blue plasma bolts flashed through the dark, lighting terrified faces for fractions of a second. I heard bodies hit the floor, heard armored boots running toward the bridge. And over all of it, the captain of the Royal Guard shouting, "Protect the Queen." Then silence. Not normal silence. The ugly kind. The kind that comes after people stop breathing. Emergency lights flickered back on. 3 Royal Guards were dead. One had a knife buried through his visor. The others looked like they'd been shot at point-blank range. Seraya stared at them without blinking. Then she looked at me. "You," she said. "Not guard. Not soldier. Just asterisk you. Asterisk." Her voice was calm enough to make my skin crawl. "You survived, Velis 9. I honestly didn't know what to say to that. So instead I looked down the corridor where the surviving officers were retreating toward escape lifts. "They're abandoning the ship," I said. "No," Seraya replied quietly. "They are abandoning me." Then the fleet channel cut back online for 3 seconds. Just long enough for every speaker aboard the Astral Crown to broadcast a single message. By order of the Imperial War Council, all loyal vessels are commanded to disengage from the capital immediately. A pause. Then, Her Majesty has been removed from authority for the protection of the Empire. The transmission ended. Nobody moved. I stared at the Queen. She stared straight ahead. And for the first time since I'd seen her, I noticed fear in her eyes. Not panic. Not weakness. Recognition. Like she already knew exactly who had done this. "The Council," she said softly. One of the remaining guards stepped toward her. "Your Majesty, we need to reach the evacuation decks immediately." Seraya turned slowly toward him. "No." The guard froze. "The evacuation routes are compromised," she continued. "If the Council ordered this, they already control the docks." Another explosion shook the corridor. This one much closer. Smoke poured through the ventilation grates overhead. Then my maintenance radio crackled to life. "All lower-rank personnel are ordered to abandon Section 9 immediately. Repeat, abandon all royal sectors immediately." The message repeated twice before cutting into static. I looked at the Queen again. She was bleeding. A thin line of dark blood ran beneath the silver plates on her side armor. One of the dead guards must have fallen against her during the attack. Nobody else had even noticed. I pointed at the wound. "You're hit." "I noticed." "You need medical." "I need to stay alive." "Fair point." The remaining guards argued among themselves for another 10 seconds before one of them finally made a decision. A terrible one. "We can't hold this corridor," he said. "We regroup with the fleet." I stared at him. "You're leaving her?" He didn't answer. Because yes, that was exactly what he was doing. Seraya looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Go," she said. And they did. 4 armed royal guards abandoned the Queen in the middle of a dying capital ship. I watched them disappear toward the evacuation lifts without looking back once. The corridor became quiet again. Just me, her, and the distant sound of fighting spreading deck by deck through the Astral Crown. Seraya leaned one hand against the wall. For the first time, she looked tired. Not weak, just alone. Then she noticed me still standing there. "You should leave too, Ryan Hale." I adjusted the shock baton on my belt. "Not really my style. You owe me nothing. That compass says otherwise." For the first time since the attack started, something almost like emotion crossed her face. Not surprise. Something smaller. More dangerous. Then another explosion hit somewhere beneath us. The floor tilted violently. Warning symbols flashed across the walls. "Hull breach detected. Lower engineering." My blood went cold. Lower engineering connected directly to the emergency maintenance corridors, which meant somebody wasn't just attacking the ship. They were systematically destroying escape routes. Months ago, during maintenance rotation, I'd noticed sealed bulkheads that didn't match official ship schematics. Dead sections nobody used anymore. Supply tunnels rerouted without explanation. At the time, I assumed it was corruption. Now I understood. This attack had been planned from inside the ship itself. For a long time. I grabbed Seraya's arm carefully before the next tremor knocked her down. "There's another way out." She looked at me sharply. "You know maintenance routes?" "I know every ugly corner of this ship." The Queen hesitated only a second before nodding. "Lead." We moved immediately. not through the royal corridors. Those were death traps now. I took her through a side maintenance hatch hidden behind a service wall near Reactor Access 3. Nobody important ever noticed those doors because servants and repair crews used them, which meant nobles ignored them completely. The tunnel beyond was narrow, dark, and hot from overloaded systems. Emergency pipes hissed overhead while distant impacts shook dust from the ceiling. Seraya followed close behind me, one hand pressed against her wound. "You worked maintenance this entire time?" she asked quietly. "Pays worse than cargo hauling somehow." "You hated it." "Constantly." A small breath escaped her. Not quite laughter, but close. We kept moving downward through the ship. That was when I saw the first sabotage charge. Military-grade explosive, hidden behind a coolant pipe. Installed months ago, judging by the corrosion. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a mutiny. This was execution. Deck by deck. Route by route. Someone aboard the Astral Crown had designed this attack to leave the Queen with nowhere to run. And suddenly I understood something even worse. "They wanted you trapped," I said. Seraya stopped walking. In the dim emergency lighting, her violet eyes looked almost black. "No," she whispered. Another explosion thundered somewhere above us. The ship groaned around us like a wounded animal. Then the Queen looked directly at me and finally said the thing both of us already knew. They wanted me dead. By the time we reached Norhaven, the Empire had already started eating itself alive. You could feel it in the streets. Not fear. Expectation. Like people had been waiting years for somebody to finally pull the first trigger. Norhaven sat beneath the lower industrial rings of Astravia Prime, buried under smokestacks, freight rails, and enough factory exhaust to block out the stars completely. The rich called it filthy. The workers called it home. To me, it smelled familiar. Oil, rain, burned circuitry, honest survival. Seraya hated it immediately. "I think the air is trying to kill me," she muttered as we pushed through a crowded transit market beneath the maglev rails. "That means your lungs still work. You're enjoying this." "A little." She gave me a tired glare beneath the hood of the worker's coat I'd stolen for her 3 hours earlier. It almost made her look normal. Almost. Except normal people didn't walk through slums with royal posture and eyes sharp enough to command fleets. The Empire had already declared her dead by then. Every public screen in the city carried the same broadcast on repeat. Queen Seraya killed during terrorist attack on the capital fleet. The message showed old footage of mourning banners outside the palace. No body, no funeral, just enough lies to make people accept the transition quietly. Seraya stopped walking when she saw it. For a second I thought she might break. Instead she stared at her own face on the screen with complete stillness. Then she said softly, "My father always said empires bury people long before they bury bodies." I didn't know what to say to that, so I bought her coffee from a street vendor instead. She stared at the cup suspiciously. "What is this?" "Real survival. It smells terrible. That's how you know it's good." She took one sip, immediately looked offended, then drank more anyway. We hid in the lower freight district near Dock 8 where nobody asked questions if you paid in cash and kept your head down. The room I rented had one bed, broken heating, and walls thin enough to hear every argument in the building. Seraya looked around once and said, "This room is smaller than my bathroom. Congratulations. You're enjoying this too." "Absolutely." That night, she slept on the bed. I slept against the door with my sidearm in my lap. Around midnight, she spoke from the darkness. "You still don't trust me." I kept my eyes on the hallway. "I trust you more than your counsel." "That is an extremely low standard." "Exactly." Silence settled between us for a while. Then she asked quietly, "Why did you stay?" I already knew she wasn't talking about the ship. "You remembered me," I said. "You saved my life." Still weird. Another pause. "Then, I searched for you after Velis 9. That got my attention." I looked over at her. Moonlight from the industrial towers cut across her face while distant factory sirens echoed outside. "You did. You disappeared. I got arrested. That was in the report." I blinked. "There was a report?" "You caused 17 million credits worth of damage to a royal docking platform." "That seems excessive." It was apparently very memorable. For the first time since the Astral Crown fell apart around us, Seraya actually smiled. Not the royal kind. A real one. Small. Dangerous. Beautiful enough to make me immediately look away. That was a mistake. Because once you notice something like that, you keep noticing it. The next morning, I took her deeper into the industrial sector to meet the only person in Norhaven I trusted enough not to sell us out. Mason Vey, mechanic, smuggler, professional disaster. I found him exactly where I expected, hanging upside down beneath an engine crawler while yelling at someone over comms. Mason, I'm busy. You're always busy. And you're always unemployed. Fair. He slid out from beneath the crawler, wiped grease across his beard, then froze when he saw Seraya standing behind me. Ryan. Yeah. Is that the queen? Seraya raised one eyebrow. Formerly. Mason stared at both of us for a long moment, then nodded once. Well, he sighed. This is definitely going to ruin my week. He hid us inside the repair yard beneath Dock 8, where abandoned cargo haulers sat rusting beneath leaking pipes. Nobody came there unless they were desperate or hiding, which meant we fit in perfectly. That evening, while Mason repaired my sidearm, Seraya finally showed him the silver compass. The second he saw it, his expression changed completely. Where did you get this? Seraya looked at me before answering. He lost it years ago. Mason turned the compass carefully in his hands. Then he laughed once. Not amused. More shocked. You two seriously don't know what this is? I frowned. It's a compass. No, Mason said quietly. It belonged to Emperor Hale. The room went still. Seraya stepped forward slowly. My father. Mason nodded. I've seen this before in old fleet records. Hale carried it during the frontier wars. He pointed toward the cracked silver casing. Open it. It doesn't open, I said. It does if you know where to press. Mason pushed his thumb against the burn mark near the hinge. The compass clicked open instantly. Inside the silver shell, hidden beneath the needle mechanism, tiny engraved coordinates shimmered beneath the workshop lights. Star maps. Dozens of them. Seraya stared at the compass like she'd stopped breathing. That's impossible. Mason looked between us carefully. No, he said. What's impossible is that Ryan Hale somehow handed the dead emperor's compass back to his daughter without realizing it. I looked at Seraya slowly. You knew? Her violet eyes met mine. Soft now. Unprotected. I kept it because of you, she admitted quietly. The repair yard suddenly felt very small. Outside, somewhere beyond the smoke and factory lights, sirens began echoing across Norhaven. Mason moved first. He killed the workshop lights instantly. Then came the sound of armored vehicles entering the district. Search patrols. Seraya looked toward the darkened windows. They found us. Mason reached beneath the workbench and pulled out a plasma rifle. Yeah, he muttered. And judging by those sirens, they brought an army. The first shot hit Mason's repair yard 30 seconds after the power died. The front blast door exploded inward hard enough to throw sparks across the ceiling. Workers scattered between engine frames while armed figures poured into the dock through smoke and flashing red searchlights. Imperial hunters. Not soldiers. Worse. Soldiers followed orders. Hunters followed money. Mason swore beside me and chambered a power cell into the rifle. I knew helping royalty would shorten my lifespan. Seraya already had a stolen sidearm in her hand. I stared at her. You know how to use that? She gave me a look so cold it could have frozen oxygen. Ryan, I was raised inside a palace where half the nobles poison each other for entertainment. Fair enough. Another explosion shook the yard. Hunters spread through the lower docks fast and professionally. Whoever sent them knew exactly where to search. They moved past other buildings without hesitation and came straight toward us, which meant somebody in Norhaven had sold us out. Mason seemed to realize the same thing. Back tunnels, he snapped. Move now. We ran. The repair yard connected to old freight maintenance shafts beneath Dock 8, narrow service tunnels flooded ankle-deep with leaking coolant and rust-colored water. Emergency lights barely worked. Pipes screamed overhead, while distant gunfire echoed through the metal walls behind us. Mason led. I stayed behind Seraya with my sidearm drawn. You've done this before, she said quietly while we moved. Running away? Surviving. Before I could answer, plasma fire lit the tunnel behind us. Hunters. Too close. Mason cursed and kicked open a maintenance hatch to the left. We dove through seconds before blue plasma bolts scorched the corridor we'd been standing in. The hatch sealed. Silence. For about 5 seconds. Then heavy impacts slammed against the other side. They'll cut through that door, Mason muttered. How long? Not long enough. The chamber around us was some kind of abandoned transit station buried beneath the industrial district. Cargo rails vanished into darkness on both sides, while old loading drones hung dead from ceiling tracks. Seraya leaned against the wall briefly, breathing harder than she wanted us to notice. Her wound still hadn't fully healed. I noticed anyway. You're bleeding again. I'm aware. You always answer like that. Yes. Mason rolled his eyes. You two flirt like exhausted war veterans. Both of us looked at him. What? He said defensively. I'm stressed. The hatch behind us groaned loudly. Right. Murder first. Emotional confusion later. Mason sprinted toward an old cargo crawler parked near the rail line. Help me start this piece of garbage. Together we forced the dead engine alive, while Seraya covered the tunnel entrance with the sidearm. The crawler screamed like it hated existence itself before finally lurching onto the tracks. The hatch exploded open behind us. Hunters flooded into the chamber. Seraya fired first. Clean shot. One hunter dropped instantly. I stared at her. You've definitely done this before. Royal etiquette lessons were intense. We jumped onto the crawler while plasma fire ripped across the station behind us. Mason slammed the throttle forward and the ancient transport shot down the rails into darkness. The hunters followed immediately using mag boots along the tunnel walls. One leap landed directly onto the back platform beside me. Big mistake. He swung a shock blade toward my throat. I hit him with a wrench. Not elegant. Very effective. The hunter fell beneath the rail system screaming. Mason laughed like a man completely detached from reality. I missed you, Ryan. Please seek medical help. The tunnel curved sharply beneath Norhaven, while warning sirens echoed through the underground rail system. Above us, the city continued tearing itself apart, while the Empire hunted its own queen through maintenance tunnels like criminals. Seraya stood near the crawler edge firing controlled shots behind us. Calm. Precise. Terrifying. Then suddenly she froze. What is that? Ahead of us. Massive doors slowly emerged from the darkness. Old military blast doors. Imperial markings covered in rust. Mason's expression changed immediately. Oh no. What? I know this place. That was not reassuring. The crawler screeched to a stop before the sealed doors. Ancient defense cannons lined the walls overhead, buried beneath decades of dust. Abandoned military infrastructure, deep enough underground to hide from orbital scans. Seraya stepped off the crawler slowly. The silver compass still hung around her neck. And suddenly the needle started moving. Not spinning randomly. Turning. Pointing directly toward the blast doors. The three of us stared at it. Mason spoke first. That's not normal. No, Seraya whispered. Slowly she approached the doors. The closer she got, the brighter the old imperial symbols began glowing across the metal surface. Something deep inside the structure powered awake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ancient systems hummed beneath the earth. Then a voice echoed through the darkness. Royal bloodline confirmed. The blast doors opened. Cold air rushed out from inside, carrying the smell of frozen metal and oceans. Beyond the doorway stretched a hidden docking tunnel descending deep beneath the planet crust. Rows of forgotten warships sat sleeping in the darkness below. Hundreds of them. Silent. Hidden. Waiting. Mason looked ready to faint. Seraya looked like she'd seen a ghost. And me? I just stared at the compass in her hand. Because suddenly I understood something terrifying. The Emperor hadn't lost that compass accidentally. He'd hidden it. And somehow, it had found its way to me. A distant explosion echoed back through the tunnels behind us. The hunters were still coming. Seraya looked at me carefully in the blue light pouring from the hidden dock. My father built this, she said softly. No, I replied. I stared at the endless fleet sleeping beneath the planet. He built it for something. For the first time since this nightmare started, I saw uncertainty crack through her royal composure. Then the hunter alarms behind us grew louder. Closer. Mason raised the plasma rifle again. Well, he muttered nervously. Whatever emotional revelation we're having here needs to happen faster. Fair. The hidden docks suddenly roared to life around us. Lights activated one by one across the underground fleet. Engines dormant for decades awakened beneath the ice and stone of the planet. And somewhere deep inside that forgotten base, something answered the Queen's arrival. The hidden fleet beneath Norhaven was not abandoned. That was the first terrifying thing we learned. The second was that it had been waiting specifically for Seraya. The underground docks stretched farther than I could see, disappearing into frozen mist beneath the planet crust. Ancient warships hung, suspended over black water, like sleeping monsters beneath ice. Some were scarred from battles fought decades ago. Others looked untouched. Every single one powered on the moment Seraya stepped inside. Rows of dormant lights awakened across the cavern. Engines rumbled. Defense systems rotated slowly toward us before suddenly standing down. Then the voice returned. "Welcome home, heir of Kalen Astravian." Seraya looked pale. Mason looked like he regretted every decision that led him here. And I stood there staring at the compass, while one ugly thought kept repeating in my head. The Emperor planned this. Not the coup. Not the betrayal. Us. A pathway opened across the dock floor leading toward a central command structure built directly into the ice wall. The doors were massive, marked with the old Astravian crest that the current empire had stopped using years ago. Seraya walked first. I stayed close beside her. "You okay?" I asked quietly. "No." "Good. Means you're still thinking." That earned me a tired sideways glance. Inside the command structure, the air felt colder. Cleaner somehow. The walls were lined with old war banners and faded military insignias from long before Seraya's reign. Screens flickered awake as we entered while hidden machinery groaned beneath the floor. Then a figure appeared in the center chamber. Not a person, a hologram. An old man wearing imperial armor. Seraya stopped breathing for half a second. "Father." Even distorted by age and static, Emperor Kalen looked imposing. Tall, severe, tired in a way that felt permanent. The hologram turned toward us. "If you are seeing this," the Emperor said calmly, "then the throne has already begun devouring itself." The room went completely silent. Seraya stepped forward slowly like she was afraid moving too fast might erase him. "You knew," she whispered. Kalen's hologram continued. "The Astravian Empire does not fall from enemies beyond our borders. It falls because power attracts those who worship themselves more than the people they rule." Mason muttered softly beside me. "Well, that sounds horribly relevant." The Emperor continued speaking while old fleet records activated across the chamber walls. Battles, noble houses, political assassinations hidden beneath decades of propaganda. Then came the part that changed everything. This reserve fleet was never built to defend the Empire from foreign threats, Kalen said. It was built to defend the people from the throne itself. Seraya looked physically struck by the words. "No, the noble houses corrupted the Empire long before your birth," the Emperor continued. "I kept this fleet hidden because I knew one day they would come for the crown openly." Images flashed across the chamber walls. Members of the War Council, military leaders, royal advisors, secret meetings, payments, fleet transfers, years of conspiracy hidden inside the Empire itself. Then one face appeared larger than the others. Lord Adrian Vale, Seraya's closest advisor. The man who had stood beside her during every ceremony since her coronation. The man who personally organized the fleet formations on the day of the betrayal. Seraya staggered backward slightly. "No," she whispered again. But this time it sounded broken. Mason looked between us carefully. "You know this guy personally?" "He raised me after my father died," Seraya said quietly. I felt sick immediately, because suddenly everything made sense. The fleet abandoning her. The sabotaged escape routes aboard the Astral Crown. The hunters finding us so quickly. This wasn't political ambition. This was someone who knew her intimately enough to predict every move she would make. The hologram shifted again. "If the council moves openly against the throne," Kalen said, "then the person closest to you will likely be the first blade." Seraya turned away sharply. I'd never seen her lose control before. Not during the attack. Not during the escape. Not while being hunted across half the empire. But now she looked small. Not physically. Emotionally. Like somebody had reached inside her and pulled the foundation out from under everything she believed. "I trusted him," she said quietly. Nobody answered. Because there wasn't anything to say. The silence lasted a long time before she finally looked toward me. And somehow that was worse. Because there was no queen left in her expression now. Just Seraya. A woman who suddenly realized the people she loved most had built her entire life around lies. "He killed them," she whispered. "The guards aboard the ship. My council. My fleet." Her voice cracked slightly. "He left me there to die." Mason wisely decided this was a good moment to disappear toward the opposite side of the command room, leaving us alone. Seraya laughed once suddenly. A horrible sound. Do you know what the worst part is? I stayed quiet. I still want to believe there's some mistake. There isn't. I know. Her eyes were wet now, though she refused to let tears fall. I know, and I still hate hearing it. I moved closer carefully. Not too close. She was still a queen even now. Still dangerous. Still trying desperately not to collapse in front of me. You don't have to hold everything together every second, I said quietly. Yes, I do. No. You were just taught that. Her jaw tightened. That empire needs strength. That empire abandoned you. The words hit harder than I intended. Seraya looked away immediately, and suddenly I understood something important. All her life, she'd been surrounded by people who obeyed her, protected her title, served her crown. But nobody stayed when things became ugly. Not the fleet, not the guards, not the council, just me. A cargo pilot turned maintenance guard who kept accidentally ruining revolutions. Somewhere deep beneath the command structure, warning alarms suddenly activated. Mason's voice echoed from the lower consoles. Bad news. We joined him near the main tactical display. Hunter ships had surrounded the upper industrial districts of Norhaven. More importantly, imperial broadcasts had begun spreading across nearby systems. The traitors were preparing for war openly now. Mason looked grim. They know the queen's alive. Seraya straightened slowly. The weakness disappeared from her posture piece by piece. Not because the pain vanished, because she buried it. Royalty was terrifying like that. Then she looked at the sleeping fleet beyond the ice chamber windows. Hundreds of hidden warships waiting in silence. Her father's final insurance policy. And finally she asked the question both of us already feared. How many crews do we have? Mason blinked. 3. I sighed. Fantastic. Seraya looked at me. Violet eyes steady again now. Cold again, but not empty. Then we start finding more, she said. For the first time since the Empire turned against her. The Queen sounded ready to fight back. We spent the next 6 weeks stealing an Empire back one captain at a time. Turns out loyalty spreads strangely when people realize the Queen they were told was dead is suddenly broadcasting military codes only the royal bloodline could know. Especially when those broadcasts come attached to evidence that half the Imperial War Council sold the fleet out from the inside. The first captains joined quietly. Smugglers, border patrol commanders, old warship crews abandoned by the capital years ago. Then entire frigates started defecting. Then destroyers. Then battle groups. Every time Seraya appeared on a transmission, more ships changed course. Not because she begged them, because she told the truth. That was rarer. Meanwhile, I somehow became responsible for organizing a secret rebellion despite having absolutely no qualifications beyond survived several disasters accidentally. Mason enjoyed this far too much. You realize, he said one night while we stood inside the frozen command dock above Arinder's black oceans, that you're technically a military commander now. I repaired cargo engines 6 months ago, and now you command hidden Imperial fleets. Life feels unrealistic lately. Seraya overheard us while reviewing fleet routes across the tactical table. You command them because they trust you. I looked at her. That seems medically concerning. A tiny smile touched her mouth. God, that smile was becoming a serious problem. Especially now, because things had changed between us. Not suddenly. Worse. Slowly. The dangerous kind. Sleepless nights aboard stolen ships. Arguments over strategy at 3 in the morning. Her standing beside me during repairs because she hated being alone now. Me noticing she always removed the crown before entering command briefings with only trusted officers present. Small things. Human things. One night, aboard the cruiser Vanguard, I found her sitting alone near the observation deck staring at the stars beyond the ice storms of Arinder. No guards. No armor. Just Seraya. I sat beside her quietly. For a while neither of us spoke. Then she asked softly, "Do you ever miss your old life?" I laughed once. The cargo hauling? The simplicity? That answer took longer. Finally I shrugged. Sometimes. What do you miss most? I thought about it honestly. Knowing who the bad guys were. That earned a quiet laugh from her. Then silence settled again. Outside the glass, distant fleet lights drifted across the frozen orbit while repair ships moved between newly awakened cruisers. A rebellion slowly becoming a war. Seraya stared at the stars for a long time before speaking again. My father used to bring me here, she said quietly. To Arinder? He said the cold made people honest. That sounds inconvenient. He believed comfort weakens rulers. I leaned back in the chair. He was probably exhausting. Her smile returned briefly, then faded. Ryan, if we fail, we won't. You don't know that. No, I admitted. But I know they're terrified of you. She looked over at me carefully. Not me. Yes, you. The fleet follows proof. The fleet follows hope. I corrected. You're just carrying it. Something vulnerable crossed her expression then. Not queenly. Not composed. Just tired. You really believe I can fix this empire? No. She blinked. I continued before she could look offended. I think the empire's broken beyond repair. That surprised her. Then why are you helping me save it? Because you're trying to make something better after. The silence that followed felt different. Heavy. Warm somehow. Dangerous. Seraya looked at me in a way that suddenly made the room feel too small. Then alarms interrupted the moment violently. Of course they did. Mason's voice exploded through the intercom. Everybody important needs to get to command right now because we officially have catastrophic problems. We reached the tactical chamber less than 2 minutes later. Every screen in the room showed the same thing. The traitor fleet. Hundreds of warships positioned above Astrovia Prime. The capital fully militarized. Lord Adrian Vale had stopped pretending entirely. Imperial banners had already been replaced with his own crest across the orbital defense grid. And at the center of it all, the astral crown. Repaired. Waiting. Seraya stared at the tactical display without speaking. General commanders argued around us immediately. We strike now. No, we need more ships. The capital defenses will slaughter us. Every hour strengthens Vale's position. Mason leaned toward me quietly. Your empire sucks. Not technically mine. Unfortunately, becoming your problem, though. Fair. Then another transmission arrived. Priority encrypted. Directly from the capital. The room went silent as the signal opened. Lord Adrian Vale appeared across the main screen dressed in ceremonial white armor. Calm. Controlled. Almost gentle. That was the terrifying part. Seraya, he said softly. Not, Your Majesty. Not traitor. Just her name. Like none of this bothered him. Seraya's face became unreadable instantly. You murdered your own empire. Vale sighed slightly. No. I saved it from weakness. By slaughtering loyal fleets. By removing instability before civil collapse became unavoidable. The room erupted angrily around us. Vale ignored everyone except her. Then his eyes shifted slightly toward me, standing beside the tactical platform. Recognition. Interest. Ah, he said quietly. The human. My skin crawled immediately. You've become difficult to remove. I get that a lot. Vale studied me for several long seconds, then smiled faintly. You know what your greatest weakness is, Ryan Hale? Probably several things. You stayed. The room felt colder suddenly. Vale looked back toward Seraya. He will die for you eventually, he said calmly. And when he does, you will finally understand why rulers cannot afford attachment. Seraya stepped forward immediately. Enough. The single word cut through the room like a blade. Vale watched her carefully. And for the first time, I realized something horrifying. He genuinely believed he loved her. In his own twisted way, which somehow made him far more dangerous. The transmission ended moments later. Silence followed. Then the tactical alarms activated across the chamber. Long-range scans. Enemy movement. The traitor fleet was repositioning. Preparing for battle. Seraya looked toward the gathered commanders slowly. No hesitation now. No fear. Only decision. We attack at dawn, she said. Nobody argued. Because suddenly the queen standing before us looked exactly like the daughter of Emperor Kalen Astravian. Cold. Certain. Ready for war. Hours later, after the command meeting finally ended, I found her alone again standing beside the frozen docking bay overlooking the hidden fleet. She didn't turn when I approached. He's right about one thing, she said quietly. I leaned beside her against the railing. Which thing? You stayed. I looked out across the ships below us. Yeah. Why? Simple question. Complicated answer. Finally, I said the only truthful thing I had left. Because when the fleet fled, I looked at her carefully. Somebody had to stand beside you. Seraya finally turned toward me then. Close enough now that I could see exhaustion beneath her eyes. Close enough to notice she'd stopped wearing royal gloves around me weeks ago. And very quietly, very dangerously, she reached for my hand. The battle for Astrovia Prime lasted 4 hours. The Empire remembered it for centuries. I remember almost none of it clearly. Only fragments. Fire across the sky. Warning sirens screaming through the flagship. The smell of overheated metal and blood. And Seraya's hand slipping from mine when the first enemy cruisers broke through our defense line. Lord Vale had prepared for everything except loyalty. That was his mistake. Halfway through the battle, 3 entire Imperial divisions turned their weapons against his flagship after Seraya broadcast the proof of the conspiracy across every military channel in the system. Ships that had hunted us weeks earlier suddenly fought beside us. The sky changed sides. But Vale still had the asterisk astral crown. Asterisk. And he drove it straight towards Seraya's command ship. I saw the collision course seconds before impact. The enemy cruiser emerged through burning debris with engines overloaded and weapons firing blindly into our shields. Alarms exploded across the bridge while officers screamed over collapsing systems. Brace for impact. Seraya stood at the center command platform issuing orders calmly while the bridge shook apart around her. Then the forward shield failed. The enemy ship opened fire directly into us. Glass shattered. The bridge erupted. I don't remember moving. 1 second I saw the plasma strike heading toward Seraya. The next I was throwing myself between her and the blast. Pain hit like being dropped inside a star. I remember hitting the floor, hearing someone shouting my name. Then nothing for a while. When I woke up, the battle was over. The first thing I saw was Seraya sitting beside the medical bed still wearing bloodstained armor. Mine, not hers. For a second neither of us spoke. Then she laughed softly in disbelief. You are the most exhausting person I have ever met. My throat hurt when I tried to answer. Did we win? Her eyes softened immediately. Yes. Good. That seemed important. Outside the medical bay windows, Astravia Prime burned beneath repair fleets and drifting wreckage. The traitors had fallen. Lord Vale was dead. The Empire survived. Barely. Weeks later, I stood inside the ruined throne chamber while workers rebuilt the palace around us. The massive crystal ceiling still carried cracks from the battle. Burn marks stained the marble floor where nobles once stood pretending the Empire was eternal. Seraya stood beside the broken throne holding the silver compass in her hands. For a long time she simply looked at it. Then she offered it back to me. You should keep it this time. I turned the compass over carefully. It never pointed north. No, she said quietly. It pointed home. I looked up at her. My father designed it that way. The coordinates changed depending on who carried it. A faint smile touched her face. He believed rulers should always know how to find their way back when everything falls apart. I stared down at the scratched silver casing. Velis 9. The docking accident. The lost compass. The hidden fleet. All of it suddenly felt far too intentional. He left this for me? Seraya stepped closer slowly. No. Her violet eyes held mine. I think he left it for the person who would stay beside me when everyone else fled. The room became very quiet. Outside the broken palace windows, the rebuilt fleet drifted across the stars. For the first time in a long time, the Empire felt calm. Seraya reached for my hand again like she had on a render. Only this time she didn't let go. You were never my guard, Ryan. What was I then? Her expression softened into something I had never seen from her before. Not queenly, not distant, just honest. My home. That hit harder than the plasma blast ever did. I looked at her for a long moment before laughing quietly under my breath. You know, I said, this is a very strange outcome for a cargo pilot. Seraya smiled. Yes. She stepped closer until our foreheads touched gently beneath the ruined throne lights. But I think I prefer strange. Far below the palace, the bells of Astravia Prime began ringing again for the first time since the Empire fell silent. And this time, neither of us stood alone.